Welcome to week 22, video 21 of our chronological Bible study. This is day 140 to day 146, or May 20th to May 26th. And we are between 970 and 960 BC, counting down to the year 1. So we're between 970 years to 960 years before year 1. We're counting down, we're BC. We took a 2-week break off, and we were in the transition time between David and Solomon, and we focused in on the Psalms for 2 weeks. And we're still in the kingdom era right now, and in our horizontal books, the books that move time forward, we're in 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles, where we're picking back up after our vertical book of Psalms. Before we got into the Psalms, we left off with King David, who was at the end of his life, had passed away, and then passed the throne on to Solomon while he was still living. And this was because he had another son named Adonijah, who was trying to take over the throne before Solomon could actually claim it. Solomon took the throne, and then he gave Adonijah a warning. Verse 52 of 1 Kings chapter 1, and it says, Solomon told him, he says, if he proves himself, talking about Adonijah, proves himself to be loyal, not a hair on his head will be touched. But if he makes trouble, he will die. So King Solomon summoned Adonijah, that's his brother, and they brought him down from the altar, because he had went to the altar and grabbed the horns, hoping that nobody would kill him. It says he came down and he bowed respectfully before King Solomon, who dismissing him, saying, "Go on home." And that's where our story left off, with Adonijah being humbled before Solomon after he tried to overthrow him. That was a look back to where we were. Now we're going to pick up, moving forward, we're going to pick up 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verses 23 through 25. It says, So Solomon took the throne of the Lord in place of his father David, and he succeeded in everything, and all Israel obeyed him. All the officials, the warriors, the sons of King David, pledged their loyalty to King Solomon. And the Lord exalted Solomon in the sight of all Israel, and he gave Solomon greater royal splendor than any king in Israel before him. So, any greater king than Saul or David before him. 2 Chronicles 1:1 says, Solomon, son of David, took firm control of his kingdom, for the Lord his God was with him, and made him very powerful. Now we're going to go back to 1 Kings chapter 2. We're going to pick up that storyline of Adonijah. So 1 Kings chapter 2, starting in verse 13. One day Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, came to see Bathsheba. So his brother Adonijah is coming to see his mother, Bathsheba. Have you come with peaceful intentions? She asked him. Yes, he said, I come in peace. The reason why she's asking this is because, Adonijah was the guy that was trying to usurp Solomon before he could actually take the throne. So she asked him, hey, are you being peaceful? He said, yes. I come in peace. In fact, I have a favor to ask of you. What is it? She asked. He replied, as you know, the kingdom was rightfully mine. All Israel wanted me to be the next king, but the tables were turned and the kingdom went to my brother instead. For that is the way the Lord wanted it. So now I have just one favor to ask of you. Please don't turn me down. What is it? She asked. He replied, speak to King Solomon on my behalf, for I know he will do anything you request. Ask him to let me marry Abishag, the girl from Shunem. Now, if we don't remember who Abishag, the girl from Shunem, the Shunammite, this was a girl that they brought to King David in his latter years, and she just slept with him without having sex. Slept with him as basically like a human bed warmer to keep him warm. He had got some kind of ailment that made him get really, really cold. So they brought her in as kind of his nursemaid, and she slept in the same bed with him, but they never had intercourse. And that's a reference back to 1 Kings chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. In the same way that Absalom had slept with all of David's 10 concubines that he left behind when he evacuated the city, Adonijah is trying to get a leg up by sleeping with the woman, or taking the woman that was a nursemaid to his father, trying to take her as his wife. And that way he's trying to get a leg up on Solomon in some way in the eyes of the people. And Solomon immediately recognizes this. It says in verse 18, Bathsheba agrees, and she says, I will speak to the king for you. So in verse 19, Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak on Adonijah's behalf. The king rose from his throne to meet her, and he bowed down before her. When he sat down on his throne again, the king ordered that a throne be brought for his mother, and she sat at his right hand. So the right hand, the place of honor, they bring out a throne, and then Bathsheba sits there next to him. And she says, "I have one small request to make of you," she said. "I hope you won't turn me down." "What is it, my mother?" he asked. "You know I won't refuse you." "Then let your brother Adonijah marry Abishag, the girl from Shunem," she replied. Verse 22, he says, "How can you possibly ask me to give Abishag to Adonijah?" King Solomon demanded. "You might as well ask me to give him the kingdom. You know that he is my older brother, and that he has Abiathar the priest and Joab, son of Zeruiah, on his side." So he has the priest from the line of Ithamar, remember, and also Joab, which was the commander of his father's armies, on his side, because we already discovered that when Adonijah tried to overthrow Solomon. Verse 23, "Then King Solomon made a vow before the Lord. He said, 'May God strike me and even kill me if Adonijah has not sealed his fate with this request.'" So he warned him to stay quiet and not cause a fuss. And Adonijah just couldn't help himself. He let pride get in his way. Verse 24, "The Lord has confirmed me and placed me on the throne of my father David. He has established my dynasty as he promised. So as surely as the Lord lives, Adonijah will die this very day." So King Solomon ordered Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, to execute him, and Adonijah was put to death. Then the king said to Abiathar the priest, "Go back to your home in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not kill you now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord for David, my father. You shared all his hardships." So verse 27 says, "So Solomon deposed Abiathar from his position as priest of the Lord, thereby fulfilling the prophecy the Lord had given at Shiloh concerning the descendants of Eli." Because remember, the Lord told Eli, because of the way he was conducting himself as high priest, all his descendants were going to lose the office of high priest. Okay, my dog has gotten comfortable now. Now we can quit with the background noise. But remember, there was a board that I showed you where the priesthood had gone from the line of Eleazar from Aaron over to the line of Ithamar, and it was sometime during the Judges era. Sometime during the Judges era it had switched, and now Solomon is correcting that by putting it back over into the line of Eleazar. So Zadok will be the high priest rather than Abiathar. Joab, the commander of David's armies that had tried to overthrow Solomon as well, he was on that side of things, had not joined Absalom's earlier rebellion, but he had joined Adonijah's rebellion. So when Joab heard about Adonijah's death, he ran to the sacred tent of the Lord and grabbed onto the horns of the altar. When this was reported to King Solomon, he sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, to execute him. So he's cleaning house now. Verse 30, "Benaiah went to the sacred tent of the Lord and said to Joab, 'The king orders you to come out.' But Joab answered, 'No, I will die here.' So Benaiah returned to the king and told him what Joab had said. 'Do as he said,' the king replied. 'Kill him there beside the altar and bury him. This will remove the guilt of Joab's senseless murders from me and from my father's family. The Lord will repay him for the murders of two men who were more righteous and better than he.'" Remember, Joab, he was probably a good general for David, but he held on to that position very ferociously. So anybody that could contest his position as commander of the armies, he got rid of them, even when it was his own cousin. "For my father knew nothing about the deaths of Abner, son of Ner, commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa, son of Jethro, commander of the army of Judah. May their blood be on Joab and his descendants forever, and may the Lord grant peace forever to David, his descendants, his dynasty, and his throne." So Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, returned to the sacred tent and killed Joab, and he was buried at his home in the wilderness. Then the king appointed Benaiah to command the army in place of Joab, and he installed Zadok the priest to take the place of Abiathar. So verse 36, "The king then sent for Shimei and told him, 'Build a house here in Jerusalem and live there, but don't step outside the city to go anywhere else. On the day you so much as cross the Kidron Valley, you will surely die, and your blood will be on your own head.' Shimei replied," this was the guy, Shimei, he was the guy that was down at the river as David was evacuating Jerusalem, and he cursed them. Remember, he was from the tribe of Benjamin, and he was putting curses on David. And as he came back, as David won this rebellion against Absalom, Shimei was there, and he was pleading for his life and apologizing and all that. And David said, "Oh, it's okay. I'm going to spare you." But now, this is Solomon. He says, "Your sentence is fair. I will do whatever my lord the king commands." So Shimei lived in Jerusalem for a long time. But 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran away to King Achish, son of Maacah of Gath. That was either the king or the son of the king that David served under when he was running from Saul, when he lived over in Philistia. When Shimei learned where they were, he saddled his donkey and went to Gath to search for them. When he found them, he brought them back to Jerusalem. Solomon heard that Shimei had left Jerusalem and had gone to Gath and returned. So the king sent for Shimei and demanded, "Did I make you swear by the Lord and warn you not to go anywhere else, or you would surely die?" And you replied, "The sentence is fair. I will do as you say." "Then why haven't you kept your oath to the Lord and obeyed my command?" The king also said to Shimei, "You certainly remember all the wicked things you did to my father, David. May the Lord now bring that evil on your own head. But may I, King Solomon, receive the Lord's blessings, and may one of your David's descendants always sit on the throne in the presence of the Lord." Then at the king's command, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, took Shimei outside and killed him. So the kingdom was now firmly in Solomon's grip. So that's a long story to the passages we read at the beginning of the video, 1 Chronicles and 2 Chronicles, where Solomon took firm control of his kingdom. Then we pick back up in 1 Kings chapter 3. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh. Okay, and remember, they weren't supposed to. When they came into the land, they weren't supposed to make any alliances with Egypt. They weren't supposed to go back to Egypt. They weren't supposed to have anything to do with Egypt. And he marries one of his daughters, and he brought her to live in the city of David until he could finish building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around the city. At that time, the people of Israel sacrificed their offerings at local places of worship, for the temple honoring the name of the Lord had not yet been built. Now remember, the ark is not in the tabernacle. The Ark of the Covenant is in the city of David underneath a tent that David had made for it. The tabernacle is at Gibeon. Originally it was at Shiloh, and when the Philistines destroyed Shiloh, they moved it, and then it was moved again after Saul killed all those priests. They moved it again. Now it's at Gibeon, and that's where it's been for some time. So they're making sacrifices all in different places, but there still is the tabernacle set up with the altar that was made in Sinai. It's still set up there at Gibeon. It says, verse 3, Solomon loved the Lord and followed all the decrees of his father David, except that Solomon too offered sacrifices and burnt incense at the local places of worship. The most important of these places of worship was at Gibeon, so the king went there and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings. In 2 Chronicles chapter 1, it says, Solomon called together all the leaders of Israel, the generals and captains of the army, the judges, and all the political and clan leaders. Then he led the entire assembly to the place of worship in Gibeon, for God's tabernacle was located there. This was the tabernacle that Moses, the Lord's servant, had made in the wilderness. So somehow through all these attacks, through the judges era, through Saul, through David, this tabernacle has survived, and also the altar that they made in the desert is still there. David had already moved the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim to the tent he had prepared for it in Jerusalem, but the bronze altar made by Bezalel, son of Uri and grandson of Hur, was there at Gibeon in front of the tabernacle of the Lord. So those were those two craftsmen that were given wisdom by the Lord to create the tabernacle and all the things that would go in it and design it. So Solomon and the people gathered in front of it to consult the Lord. There in front of the tabernacle, Solomon went up to the bronze altar in the Lord's presence and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings on it. 1 Kings chapter 3, this is where it gets interesting. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 5, that night the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, "What do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you." So in this moment, Solomon could have asked for anything. He could have asked for anything. Treasures. He could have asked for 10,000 horses. He could have asked for 10,000 wives. He could anything that a king could want. To rule over the whole earth. He could have asked for all these things. But he doesn't. He says, "I'll give you whatever you want. Ask." So verse 6, Solomon replied, "You showed great and faithful love to your servant, my father David, because he was honest and true and faithful to you. And you have continued to show this great and faithful love to him today by giving him a son to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord my God, You have made me king instead of my father David, but I am like a little child who doesn't know his way around. So this is kind of a humble thing for Solomon to be able to do. Solomon's being real right now. You know, he is the king of all of Israel, right? He's sitting on the throne, and he's humbling himself before God. And this really shows what kind of heart Solomon has, and actually how wise he was before God made him wise. He says, I sit here in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous they cannot be counted. Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours? The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. So God replied, because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice, and have not asked for a long life or wealth or death of your enemies, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart such as no one else has had or ever will have. And I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and fame. No other king in all the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And if you follow me and obey my decrees and my commands, as your father David did, I will give you a long life. He asked for the heart and the wisdom to be a good ruler. Because of that, just like David, because of his heart in the matter, God rewards him with all the things he didn't ask for, which a normal man would ask for. You know, I want riches, I want a long life, I want to live for a long time, I want to have a giant family, I want to, all these things, right? Then Solomon woke up, this is verse 15, then Solomon woke up and realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant when he sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings. Then he invited all his officials to a great banquet. So we just read how Solomon got his wisdom, right? It was God ordained. It was given to Solomon only because he didn't ask for all these other things. So now we get to see a demonstration of Solomon's wisdom. 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 16. Sometime later, true prostitutes came to the king who had have an argument settled. Please, my lord, one of them began. This woman and I live in the same house. I gave birth to a baby while she was with me in the house. 3 days later, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There were only 2 of us in the house. So there's the evidence. Okay? So you got 2 ladies living in one room. They both get pregnant and there's nobody else in there. Verse 19, but her baby died during the night when she rolled over on it. Then she got up in the night and took my son from beside me while I was asleep. And she laid her dead child in my arms and took mine to sleep beside her. And in the morning, when I tried to nurse my son, he was dead. But when I looked more closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't my son at all. Then the other woman interrupted, it certainly was your son, and the living child is mine. No, the first woman said, the living child is mine, and the dead one is yours. And so they argued back and forth before the king. Then the king said, let's get the facts straight. Both of you claim the living child is yours, and each says that the dead one belongs to the other. All right, bring me a sword. So a sword was brought to the king. So he gets his facts straight. He has a sword brought to him. Right? What is he going to do with a sword and a baby and these 2 ladies, right? And never mind the fact that prostitution in the kingdom of priests, in the nation of priests now, prostitution is so commonplace that he doesn't reprimand them for being prostitutes. He's focused on the issue at hand as the judge. Verse 25, then he said, cut the living child in 2 and give half to one woman and half to the other. Then the woman who was the real mother of the living child, who loved him very much, cried out, oh no, my lord, give her the child. Please don't kill him. But the other woman said, all right, he will be neither yours nor mine. Divide him between us. Then the king said, do not kill the child, but give him to the woman who wants him to live, for she is his mother. So, in his wisdom, he figured out who the real mother was in this whole ordeal, because really the real mother is obviously the one that doesn't matter. She wants her child to live. It doesn't matter who the child lives with. She just wants her child to stay alive. And that's how he decides which one is the real mother. Verse 28, when all Israel heard the king's decision, the people were in awe of the king, for they saw the wisdom of God had been given him for rendering justice. So now everyone else recognizes this young man who has now become king of Israel is not just somebody that's just in there by birthright. He's been selected by God to be king. He's not just David's son. So what happens from here on out is Solomon works with Hiram, which is the king of Tyre, which is a kingdom that's up on the coast on the Mediterranean. It's north, let me see, if you're looking at the camera, it would be northwest of Jerusalem, up on the coast of the Mediterranean. Here's the Mediterranean Sea, and there's Israel. So you say here's Jerusalem down here. It would be up here on the coast of the Mediterranean, the kingdom of Tyre. And we're going to run into this kingdom of Tyre several times throughout the rest of our study. So Solomon works with the king of Tyre. He gets supplies and all the things that he needs to make this temple, to finally build the temple. Because remember, David wasn't allowed to build it because he was a man of war. And Solomon now builds the temple, and he builds his palace, and he makes Israel a great nation through trade. Remember, God selected this narrow strip of land between the Mediterranean Sea and the River Jordan as a thoroughfare where anybody wanted to go from the continent of Africa to the continent of Europe, or the continent of Asia to the continent of Africa, right? So basically from Egypt to Turkey, from Turkey to Egypt, from Egypt to Asia, right? They had to go through that narrow strip of land that we call Israel. And he had selected that because he was going to set up the nation of priests, the kingdom of priests in that area, and anybody that traveled through there would then have to interact with these people, and then they would have a chance to know him personally and interact with God's people. Well, now Solomon has used that same advantage as that narrow strip of land. He's used it now for trade, right? And anything that passes through here or goes from this place to that place, he can collect a tax on it. He can be a part of the transaction that's going on. So obviously during this time Israel prospers, right? They're going to make become a very rich nation. Because he now has this area under control and he can use all these connections now for trade, now he has the ability to obtain all of the materials that he needs to build the temple. So in 1 Kings chapter 6, Solomon builds the temple. Okay, and this takes place about 966 BC. It says in the 4th year of his reign. So we know that they began to construct the temple, and it was also 480 years after the Exodus. We find out there that's in verse 1 of 1 Kings chapter 6. And it gives you the dimensions of the temple there. You know, it says the temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, 45 feet high. The entry room at the front of the temple was 30 feet wide. It projected outward 15 feet. So you had an entry room, then you had the actual temple, and then you had the Holy of Holies over in that. It's in the 2nd Chronicles, the dimensions of that. Most holy place that was 30 feet wide, corresponding to the width of the temple, and 30 feet deep. So you have a square, a 30-foot square, the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant will be. And he places in there 2 wooden cherubim that's overlaid with gold, and their wings touch each other, so they take up the whole width of the room, the whole 30 feet of the room. And it says in 2 Chronicles chapter 3 there, it says that Solomon began to build the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah. Now remember, Mount Moriah, what's taken place on this mountain already? Okay, more than likely, this is the same place where Melchizedek, I posted it in the links last week there where they think they found the temple of Melchizedek. That was in the comments section on the last week's video, where the temple of Melchizedek likely was. This was the place where Abraham came to sacrifice Isaac and didn't. This was also the place that was the threshing floor of Araunah, where the plague stopped, and then David bought it from Araunah and then decided that was going to be the place where they would build the temple. It says, you know, the main room of the temple was paneled with cypress wood. And if you don't know anything about cypress wood, cypress is highly valued because it dissuades insects from getting into it. That's one advantage. The other advantage is it's waterproof. You can make a canoe out of just a cypress tree. You can hollow it out and throw it on top of the water, and you can use it for a boat. So it's waterproof. The wood is waterproof. So cypress is a valued wood. And it's also argued that this may be the gopher wood that the ark, the Noah's ark, was made of all those thousands of years earlier. So a highly valued wood. And also it has cedar inside of it. It says in 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 15, it says, the entire inside from floor to ceiling was paneled with wood. He paneled the walls and ceiling with cedar, and he used planks of cypress for the floors. All right, so, and then they overlaid that with gold and with decoration. Very expensive temple that's being built here. And it says over in verse 37, 1 Kings chapter 6, it says, the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid in mid-spring in the month of Ziv during the 4th year of Solomon's reign. The entire building was completed in every detail by mid-autumn in the month of Bul during the 11th year of his reign. So it took 7 years to build the temple. So that would figure, you know, it's 7 years is God's number, the perfect number, the number of completion, and it would take 7 years to build the temple. That kind of makes sense. After that, he takes 13 years to build his palace. That's 1 Kings chapter 7. And then they have some craftsmen come over that work with bronze, and they build all the furnishings for the temple. They build 2 pillars, 2 bronze pillars. They build 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillar. So the capital, like the capital is the top of the column, kind of that sits on top of it. 2 networks of interwoven chains that decorated the capitals. Okay, 400 pomegranates that hung from the chains on the capitals. 10 water carts holding the 10 basins. And then you had the sea, which was this gigantic bowl, a gigantic bowl used for washing, and the 12 oxen. And that big bowl, the sea, what they called the sea, was set on top of 12 bronze oxen. So you had 3 facing each direction. So 4 directions, 3 times 4 is 12, so 12 oxen. The ash buckets, the shovels, and the bowls. And it says in verse 46, it said, the king had them cast in clay molds in the Jordan Valley between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon did not weigh all the things because there were so many, the weight of the bronze could not be measured. Solomon also made all the furnishings of the temple of the Lord, the gold altar. So now there's a new altar, a gold one. Gold altar, the gold table for the bread of the presence. So no longer just a table, it's a gold table. The lampstands, so now just instead of just one lampstand that was like in the tabernacle, there's lampstands of solid gold, 5 on the south, 5 on the north, in front of the most holy place. Then remember, that was the Holy of Holies, the room inside the room there where the Ark of the Covenant would be placed. The small bowls, lamp snuffers, bowls, ladles, incense burners, all of solid gold. So they're not wood overlaid with gold as they were before. Now these are solid gold. The doors for the entrance to the most holy place, and the main room in the temple with their fronts overlaid with gold. So King Solomon finished all of his work on the temple of the Lord. Then he brought all the gifts his father David had dedicated, the silver, the gold, and the various articles, that he stored them in the treasuries of the Lord's temple. So remember, David had collected all this wealth also in preparation for the building of the temple, because he wasn't actually able to build it. He had collected all this stuff. Well, Solomon takes that and puts that in a treasury places inside the temple. So now within the temple, there's the temple treasuries. Okay? Well, remember that. That's going to come into play later on. We pick back up, 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 1. Solomon then summoned to Jerusalem the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the ancestral families of the Israelites. They were to bring the Ark of the Lord's covenant to the temple from its location in the city of David. So the city of David, you got the Temple Mount. I'll try to draw up my hands here. You got the Temple Mount. Everybody always thinks of Israel. The Temple Mount here, where the Dome of the Rock is today. Okay, this is where the temple was built. Solomon's temple was. Okay, and it's a level place. It's on top of Mount Moriah. Just south of there, this is the city of David underneath. Okay, so somewhere in the city of David, there's the Ark of the Covenant with the tablets in it, there in a tent that David had built for, and that's where it's been since they brought it back from Kiriath Jearim. And now all of this big group of respected elders and Israelites, along with King Solomon, they're going to take the ark from down here and they're going to move it up and put it into the Holy of Holies inside the temple. It says they were to bring the ark of the Lord's covenant to the temple from its location, the city of David, also known as Zion. This is where that word Zion comes from. When somebody calls you a Zionist, that means that you're a supporter of Zion. This is Israel. You're a supporter of Israel. So all the men of Israel assembled before King Solomon at the annual festival of shelters, was the festival of booths, which is held in early autumn in the month of Ethanim. When all the elders of Israel arrived, the priest picked up the ark. So, all right, we figured that out with David the first time. Remember, the people died moving it the wrong way. So he came back with priests after he had checked the scripture, went back and they moved it the right way. So Solomon learns from David's mistake. He gets priests. Levites brought up the ark of the Lord along with the special tent and all the sacred items that had been in it. There before the ark, King Solomon and the entire community of Israel sacrificed so many sheep, goats, and cattle that no one could keep count. Then the priests carried the ark of the Lord covenant into the inner sanctuary of the temple, the most holy place, and placed it beneath the wings of the cherubim. The cherubim spread their wings over the ark, forming a canopy over the ark and its carrying poles. These poles were so long that their ends could be seen from the holy place. Remember, there was the holy place and then there was the most holy place in there that only the high priest could enter into, but not from the outside. So you couldn't see them from the outside. They are still there to this day. So when 1 Kings was written, the ark was still there in the temple. Nothing was in the ark except the 2 stone tablets that Moses had placed in it at Mount Sinai, where the Lord had made a covenant with the people of Israel when they left the land of Egypt. Now remember, there was Aaron's staff that laid along beside it at one point. There was the gold rats, gold tumors the Philistines had tried to add to it. There's been all kinds of things that accompanied the ark, but at this point, only the stone tablets, written by the finger of God, are in the ark. And so it's been preserved all the time since they were wandering in the desert in Sinai. All the way until this time, these tablets have been preserved. When the priest came out of the holy place, a thick cloud filled the temple of the Lord. The priests could not continue their service because of the cloud, for the glorious presence of the Lord filled the temple of the Lord. Now, imagine this. This generation has never seen anything like this. Their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents followed this pillar of cloud through the desert, right? And it turned into a pillar of fire at night. Right, and they followed this through the desert for 40 years. Okay, and this is a significant moment right now, because this is the first time, generations and generations and generations and generations later, the pillar of cloud finally comes back, and it goes back in. It goes into the temple same way that it did when Moses camped outside it. Moses and Aaron camped outside of it while they were in the desert. So it's been a long time since the presence of the Lord in this way, done in this way with the pillar of cloud, has materialized so people could see it. So this had to make quite an impression on the people who were attending this ceremony, and also to Solomon. In verse 11 of 2 Chronicles chapter 5, it says, the priests left the holy place. All the priests who were present had purified themselves, whether or not they were on duty that day. And the Levites, who were musicians, Asaph, that's the writer of a lot of those psalms that we read, Heman, Jeduthun, and all their sons and their brothers were dressed in fine linen robes and stood at the east side of the altar playing cymbals, lyres, and harps. And they were joined by 120 priests who were playing trumpets, and the trumpeters and singers performing together in unison to praise and give thanks to the Lord. Accompanied by trumpets, cymbals, and other instruments, they raised their voices and praised the Lord with these words, He is good. His faithful love endures forever. And at that moment a thick cloud filled the temple of the Lord. The priests could not continue their service because of the cloud, for the glorious presence of the Lord filled the temple of God. Then, 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 14. Then the king turned around to the entire community of Israel standing before him and gave this blessing. Praise the Lord, the God of Israel, who has kept the promise He made to my father David. For He told my father, from the day I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I have never chosen a city among any of the tribes of Israel as a place where a temple should be built to honor my name. but I have chosen David to be king over my people Israel. Then Solomon said, my father David wanted to build this temple to honor the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. But the Lord told him, you wanted to build a temple to honor my name. Your intention is good, but you're not the one to do it. One of your own sons will build the temple to honor me. And now the Lord has fulfilled the promise he made, for I have become king in my father's place, and now I sit on the throne of Israel, just as the Lord promised. I have built this temple to honor the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. I have prepared a place there for the ark, which contains the covenant that the Lord made with our ancestors. Talking about the Mosaic covenant made with our ancestors when he brought them out of Egypt. This is an important lesson to be learned there. David was a great man. He was a mighty man. You would have thought that if anybody was going to build a magnificent temple to the Lord, it would have been David. Somebody that was in the trenches, that fought the giants, that dealt with temptation, that struggled against himself, that lost. He went through the struggles of life. He lost sons because of his own sin. He dealt with that. You would think that that would make him the perfect candidate for that. And that's a hard fact for a lot of people, a lot of parents maybe, or a lot of leaders to swallow sometimes. It's not always all about you. Sometimes it's about somebody that comes along from behind you, that learns from you and learns from your mistakes, and is lived in your tutorship for their lives, and they've learned, and now they can build on the foundation that you've laid for them. So it may not be you that builds the temple. It may be somebody that learned from you that will build the temple later on, figuratively, the temple. So Solomon says a prayer. He gives a prayer to the Lord here, and it's about this temple. And in verse 46 of chapter 8 of 1 Kings, he says, if they sin against you, meaning the people of Israel, if they sin against you, and who has never sinned, like everybody sins, you might become angry with them and let their enemies conquer them and take them captive to their land, far away or near. Now, this is going to happen pretty soon, in some generations away from now. This is going to take place. So this is prophecy about things to come. But in that land of exile, they might turn to you in repentance and pray, we have sinned, done evil, and acted wickedly. If they turn to you with their whole heart and soul in the land of their enemies, and pray toward the land you gave to their ancestors, toward this city you have chosen, and towards this temple I have built to honor your name, then hear their prayers and their petition from heaven where you live, and uphold their cause. Forgive your people who have sinned against you. Forgive all the offenses they have committed against you. Make their captors merciful to them. For they are your people, your special possession, whom you brought out of the iron smelting furnace of Egypt. And this happens later on, and we'll see that when they're taken to Babylon. First the Assyrians will invade, and they're going to take off the northern kingdom. They're going to take the northern kingdom over to Assyria, and then after that the Babylonians, having conquered the Assyrians, they will come in, and then they will finally take over Judah. And it's all because of disobedience. It's all because they fall away from the Lord, as Solomon said, as we all do. We all sin. We all fall away. That's why we have to stay so close and keep God as such an integral part of our lives, because without His power, without Him lifting us up, we're easily led astray, easily led into sin, easily led into rebellion, and with rebellion comes death. So this is kind of Solomon's prophecy about what's going to happen many years down the road. When Solomon, this is 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 54, when Solomon finished making these prayers and petitions to the Lord, he stood up in front of the altar of the Lord, where he had been kneeling with his hands raised toward heaven, and he stood and in a loud voice blessed the entire congregation of Israel. So he pronounces a blessing on them, and they give a gigantic peace offering, like 22,000 cattle, 120,000 sheep and goats. Think about all the livestock that is there, that is being kept there next to the temple to make that sort of sacrifice. In 1 Kings chapter 9, we get the Lord's response from all those prayers that Solomon had made. It says, so Solomon finished building the temple of the Lord as well as the royal palace. He completed everything he had planned to do. Then the Lord appeared to Solomon a second time, and he had done before at Gibeon. And the Lord said to him, I have heard your prayer and your petition. I have set this temple apart to be holy. This place you have built where my name will be honored forever. I will always watch over it, for it is dear to my heart. As for you, if you will follow me with integrity and godliness, as David your father did, obeying all my commands, decrees, and regulations, then I will establish the throne of your dynasty over Israel forever. For I made this promise to your father David, one of your descendants will always sit on the throne of Israel. But if you or your descendants abandon me and disobey the commands and decrees I have given you, and if you serve and worship other gods, then I will uproot Israel from this land I have given them. I will reject this temple that I have made holy to honor my name, and I will make Israel an object of mockery and ridicule among the nations. And though this temple is impressive now, all who pass by will be appalled and will gasp in horror. They will ask, why did the Lord do such terrible things to this land and to this temple? And the answer will be, because his people abandoned the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of Egypt, and they worshipped other gods instead and bowed down to them. That is why the Lord has brought all these disasters on them. And this takes place. And the lesson for us to learn there is exactly what I said before. Stay close to the Lord. Cling to him. Hold on to the hem of his garment, because that's the only way you're getting out of here alive. 1 Kings chapter 10, the Queen of Sheba hears about Solomon's fame, and she comes and honors and hears how wise he is, and she gives him a lot of gold and spices and jewels, and she's just dumbfounded by the wisdom that Solomon has. A lot of people make a lot of different stories out from that individual story, but it just says that King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba whatever she asked for, besides all the customary gifts he had so generously given. Then she and all her attendants returned to their own land. So remember now, Solomon has got a trade network going, not only with the king of Tyre, but also with Egypt and other nations around there. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 14, it says, each year Solomon received about 25 tons of gold. That's a lot of gold. 25 tons of gold. This did not include the additional revenue he received from merchants and traders and all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the land. He made a huge throne, verse 18, a huge throne decorated with ivory and overlaid with fine gold. So it's made of ivory and then overlaid with gold. Really expensive. For silver was considered worthless in Solomon's day. That's how rich the nation of Israel was. He had a fleet of trading ships that were built. Once every 3 years, the ships returned loaded with gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. So that's interesting. Now, King Solomon became richer and wiser than any other king on earth. And people from every nation came to consult him and to hear the wisdom God had given him. Year after year, everyone who visited brought him gifts of silver and gold, clothing, weapons, spices, horses, and mules. Solomon built up a huge force of chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots, 12,000 horses. He stationed some of them in the chariot cities, some near Jerusalem. The king made silver as plentiful in Jerusalem as stone. So as plentiful as the rocks are in your yard, that's how plentiful silver was in the kingdom of Israel in that time. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and from Cilicia. The king's traders acquired them from Cilicia at the standard price. At that time, chariots from Egypt could be purchased for 600 pieces of silver, and the horses for 150 pieces of silver. They were then exported to the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Aram. So he becomes kind of like a horse trader. 2 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 26 says he ruled over all the kings from the Euphrates River. Now that's the other side of remember we had the Fertile Crescent. Remember in the beginning of the study we talked about the Fertile Crescent, right? It runs up from Egypt, right up along the coast of the Mediterranean, up to Turkey, and then back down the Euphrates River, back down to modern day Kuwait over here. This says his kingdom extended from the Euphrates River, so the Euphrates River in the north, not all the way down here at the bottom of the Fertile Crescent, but the top of the Fertile Crescent, all the way down to the border of Egypt in the south. So this whole area here that bordered the Mediterranean. The king made silver as plentiful in Jerusalem as stone, and valuable cedar timber was as common as the sycamore fig trees that grow in the foothills of Judah. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and many other countries. Now this is an important point to remember here. He wasn't supposed to have a lot of horses. Deuteronomy chapter 17 verse 16, when God was giving the rules to Moses for electing a king and what the king must do. Remember we talked about the king is supposed to write a copy of the law by hand in the company of a Levite. A Levite's supposed to watch him do that, and then he's supposed to carry it with him all the time and read it daily. We concentrate on that, but there was other rules for the king also, and that God was supposed to select this king. Remember we talked about that with the first king who they didn't select, that God didn't select, and then was killed. And then Saul was the first actual king that God selected. And then we went to David, which was the second king that God selected. So we got that. And then in verse 16 of Deuteronomy 17, it says, the king must not build up a large stable of horses for himself, or send his people to Egypt to buy horses. For the Lord has told you, you must never return to Egypt. The king must not take many wives for himself, because they will turn his heart away from the Lord. And he must not accumulate large amounts of wealth in silver and gold for himself. So that's a key piece of information that Solomon's missing right now or ignoring. So we're going to see how this plays out. Right now, life is good for Solomon and Solomon's people, and for all of Israel for that fact. So in 1 Kings chapter 4, we got the new power players. Azariah, the son of Zadok, was the high priest. We've got Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was the commander of the army, so he took Joab's place. And it says Abiathar is still there as a priest, but Zadok is the high priest. And let's see here, you got governors and you got advisors that are put in place. And now he has 12 district governors. In verse 7 of 1 Kings chapter 4, he has 12 district governors who were over all Israel. So basically he makes it into kind of a republic. So 1 Kings chapter 4 says, the people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Prophecy fulfilled. Abrahamic covenant. Go back to Genesis and read. That's straight up. He told Abraham, your descendants will be as numerous as sand on the seashore. The actual verbiage is repeated here. They were very contented with plenty to eat and drink. Prophecy fulfilled. Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River in the north to the land of the Philistines, the border of Egypt in the south. They conquered peoples of those lands, sent tribute money to Solomon, and continued to serve him throughout his lifetime. The daily food requirements for Solomon's palace, get this, for all of the workers in his palace and for the royal family, 150 bushels of flour, 300 bushels of meal, over 10 oxen from the fattening pens, 20 pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep or goats, as well as deer, gazelles, roe deer, and choice poultry. So, talking about a lot of animals and a lot of resources being brought in just for the palace, not to mention the rest of the city of David and the people in Jerusalem. So, you can see Solomon is prospering, Israel is prospering, and Solomon forgot about that little passage in Deuteronomy 17. So we're going to start with that next week. We're going to remind ourselves of that, and we're going to see how this whole thing, this whole time of Solomon plays out. But before we get there, before we continue moving along with our story, chronologically, we're going to go into the book of Proverbs. And the reason why we're going to the book of Proverbs is because Solomon is the author of Proverbs. We find out in Proverbs 1:1, it says, these are the Proverbs of Solomon, David's son, king of Israel. There's a lot of people out there now that debate over who wrote Proverbs, and they were written over a long amount of time. Well, verse 1:1 tells you who wrote the book of Proverbs, and there's no need in debating that. And it makes sense, being that he was the wisest man of his time, that he would write a book of wisdom. Actually, he writes several books of wisdom. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs. So we're going to get into those wisdom books as well. Wisdom books written by the wisest man of the time. And then we'll pick back up our chronological study. We'll hit it a little bit before we get into Ecclesiastes, and then we're going to really pick it up after we get through the vertical book of Ecclesiastes. So we got 3 vertical books coming up. We've got Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. Okay, so we got those 3 vertical books. Remember, they intercede during the horizontal timeline. So we're going to pause right here during the height of Israel, when Solomon has built Israel into this prosperous nation, but he's ignoring Deuteronomy 17 just a little bit, right? He's building up a big stables of horses. He's going to have many wives. He's collecting wealth for himself, right? Israel's become a great nation, a powerful nation. And we're going to pick back up our chronological study, our timeline, after we get through these 3 wisdom books. So next week we'll get into the Proverbs, and I hope you have a good week. Hope this got you all caught up with where we're at chronologically, and we'll see you next week.